You can start.
Good afternoon to everyone present here. Landscape design starts when one starts to interact with the elements within the landscape itself. As a human being, it's a basic instinct to connect with our surrounding, be immersed in nature, and not just watch it from a distance. This is journey of how landscape architecture can also be interactive, which brings us to our topic for today, that is hands-on experience about landscape. Our speaker for today is Ms. Anushi Chitnis. Being an architect and permaculture design by profession, Ms. has designed utilitarian gardens and landscapes that one can actually interact with. She has worked with Vikas and Neelama Bhusekar and Land Art Designs in Pune. Currently, ma'am is an independent designer who offers landscape and permaculture design, interior design, and art commission representing biodiversity. Her design projects also include residential and commercial landscape design with an ecological underlay. Some of those projects are namely Sensory Garden in Victoria Memorial School for Blind Mumbai and Thames Garden in the National Railway Museum New Delhi. Her love for nature also extends itself towards her artwork, including murals, illustrations, upcycle objects, and painting with natural dyes and inks. Also, a piece of information for all the participants. At the end of the session, kindly fill out the feedback form sent on the chat box and email. With this informed now, I would like to pass it to ma'am. Ma'am, please continue ahead.
All right. Thank you so much, Samriddhi, for the introduction. And thank you so much, Silpa, for calling me on this platform. And I hope you guys find my session interesting enough and maybe motivating enough to start something on your own in your own little gardens, in your own little houses. And if you guys have space, then maybe you can extend those little learnings to your spaces as well. So, without taking up too much time, I think we should get started with the presentation for today. All right. Let me start the screen sharing first. Okay, is the screen visible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So today I'm going to talk about this topic called hands-on landscapes. I call it hands-on because what happens is normally in the design field, sometimes things are restricted to being designs being done on paper and things getting executed, but very rarely we are involved in the actual making of the process where you're working with the plants, working with the soil, maybe have spiders and other insects crawling all over you and all those kinds of things. So actually interacting with all the elements in the landscape, I don't think the total connect with your landscape or the design really happens, and that works on many levels, even from a mindfulness point of view. So that is why hands on, because one, yes, you're working with your own hands, and second, you're giving time for nature and the landscape to evolve, which is something very important. You see, nature is doing things at its own pace, at its own intervals. So it's very necessary respect those, and at the same time we are kind of like allowing nature to come and establish in its own forms, while we are just giving those little supportive, say, framework on the side for the project, I mean for the nature to take place. So for me, basically, this journey starts of in general of landscape architecture started with this. Okay, everything is else fine, but something is missing. So the reason I say this because I am trained as an architect. But while doing architecture, I realized, okay, something is missing. Maybe I need to start focusing on the areas around the building more than the building in concern. So then I started looking into landscape architecture. While doing landscape architecture, I realized, okay, there is a big ecological underlay missing in the general scenario. So maybe start looking into ecological bit of it. So that is how the course with the ecological society happened and all those things happened. Then while doing my masters, again I realized, okay, again something is missing because human beings have a very decisive impact on their surroundings. Okay. So it cannot be entirely only about the ecology. We are part of the ecosystem as well. So where do we come into play? That is where luckily permaculture came into play, and the journey from an architect, being an architect, to getting into permaculture design happened. So every time something is missing kind of propels me in a direction and is always a guiding factor to what I want to do later. So I'm sure all of you must have gone to some treks or the other during monsoons or during winters, and you must be seeing these extensive landscapes all around. There are these big mature trees, there are smaller trees and shrubs and climbers and lianas and ground covers, and this entire community of plants that comes together. And it's practically thriving on its own. I mean, with the plants, there is a lot of fauna. There are mammals and there are birds, reptiles, insects of what orders and not, everything coming together. And we are not really maintaining these landscapes. They are sustaining on their own. So there are these natural forces that are governing this entire natural ecosystem. And it's just happening on its own. We don't have to invest too much time and effort or keep on watering those plants, keep on manuring those plants. It's just happening. So then, if such strong, robust systems happen to exist in nature, the question is, why can't we just borrow the logic and the concepts and try to apply those in our landscapes, in our landscapes that we are creating around our house, in our own house, and make sure we are trying to use the same principles in order and make those utilitarian landscapes, so that our maybe needs of food, our needs of shelter, our needs of produce from nature, everything is taken care of. At the same time, we are not exploiting nature. So this is where permaculture as a concept comes into play. What is permaculture design? Now I can actually go on talking about this for a really long time, but let me restrict it to just one sentence. Permaculture design is nothing but a design system where we are trying to take up concepts from the natural ecosystems and merge them or borrow them and utilize them for developing the landscape systems around us. So these can be used for our productive landscapes where they are taking care of our edible requirements. These can be used in also in part to design a space in a way that we are not ecologically harming that particular site. At the same time, we are trying to keep a balance between our use, our needs, our requirements, and the needs of the ecosystem of that particular space. So, in a nutshell, we are trying to create spaces where all the elements of nature are there in equal, have their own equity, and we are very much a part of this ecosystem. We are not really superimposing our will on nature or any of the ecosystem. So, when we are done with all the courses and everything, we come back. This happened with me. So, like, where do you begin? Because nobody really approaches you with projects of come, like, yes, you have done the course, now come and design a farm. That doesn't happen. Plus, when you go on land, you're completely clueless what happens and how do you go ahead with it. So, my first experimental play field for this to do was my own little window. I had this small window of around, which was not even a balcony. It was literally a square rectangular space of around 8 feet by 10, 6 feet by 10 feet. And in that little space, I started planting seeds because this is what we learn. Like you come back home and you get seeds of other plants and all the leafy vegetables and beans and whatnot, and you just start experimenting with them. So we also came back from the course and started, we had these little ornamentals already in the window. So we started inserting a little bit of edibles. So these are your amaranth, mat, achi bhaji apan je manto. Then there are beans, then there are different types of salad leaves and whatnot. We just started putting them, inserting them in these ornamental ones, and actually started getting a produce from it. So initially it was restricted to this kind of a situation where you have some leaves coming and it doesn't take care of your entire meal. But the joy of harvesting something from your own window, you planted something right from seed and it has grown and now you're going to eat it. It's a really beautiful feeling to experience. So this is how the journey started for me. It's like I started looking and that anticipation of, wow, today 2 leaves have come, today 1 seed has sprouted. It's something that you look forward to every morning when you're doing that. So this is how it started, with a very small window, and then we started taking it to the next level. once you know that things are growing in your window, you're obviously going to attract a lot of little beings into your window. For us, they started with firstly rats and pigeons coming to mess up the window big time, but eventually we understood how to deal with them and how to make sure that your plants are not affected. At the same time, we started noting interactions of little caterpillars coming and chomping on your little growing kadi patta, but still we allowed them to happen because we could see those little interactions right in front of us. We started getting different types of beans, different types of salad leaves. We started growing bhindi plants in bottles. We actually had 4 feet tall bhindi plants growing in like 3 inches or 2 inches of soil. That is where we started understanding the importance of soil nutrition, how different soil mixes can be prepared and so efficiently that they can actually help you supply with your little dose of vegetables and can aid in the kitchen. We also started noticing how the sunlight in the window streams in. We started understanding how the cycles of sunlight are, how the cycles of rain and wind are, and accordingly started altering our planting strategies as well. So these little experiments kind of started helping us in a way because all these understandings in help me design my sites and understand the planting cycles over on the sites as well. Then next step, we went further ahead and started saving the seeds, because this is another important topic that perhaps we can take up an entire discussion. But saving your own seeds, creating your next set of plants from the very same seeds, distributing these seeds, it all just, it's another level of work altogether, and it is so joyous. I mean, come on, you don't have to anymore depend on the market to even go and buy your seeds. You just have to make sure you harvest yours and make sure you save them. So that is how these cycles just started one after the other. Then there was different types of fungi that started coming up in the soil, again indicating what is really happening. That means probably the soil organisms had started multiplying. Some of you will know it better, some of you must already be doing that. We started having different types of butterflies streaming in, birds and munias and orioles, sunbirds, tailor birds. They had become like regular visitors to our window, and it itself became like a small tiny habitat in itself, to have these things. We had different types of lizards also coming. At that point I never understood the species and all, but they were there. So in a way, your window itself starts becoming an ecosystem, and aesthetics is secondary, I felt, because you just have to change the way you look at your landscape. The way you just appreciate a forest is the same way you appreciate your little window, and automatically things just start looking really beautiful. From a corner, our window used to look like some messy jungle thing out there suddenly out of nowhere. But believe me, the joy of seeing those birds coming in every morning was beyond explanation. So next, our thing was to start composting our food. I mean, all these actually go hand in hand. Even the soil mixes that we used to use used to have 1/3 of the portion for composting. And composting is very simple. I mean, all you have to do is get your basic logic correct, like what you really need to put in those pots. You don't need fancy things, but there are beautiful systems available in the market which has made it very easier now, so that you don't have to feel to, if you're not used to working with soil, or if you're not used to working with the wet waste, then perhaps you won't feel that comfortable initially. But once you get started with the process, then even that is something that becomes very enjoyable. Like even today, when a fresh batch of compost is prepared, I will very nicely pick it up with my hands and try to smell it and enjoy that. So that becomes like an everyday thing. So now we don't put out any wet waste at all. Everything gets recycled inside the house. And believe me, really, all we have is 3 matkas together, some bit of red soil that was there initially, some brown matter, patte girte hai road pe, you just have to pick them and come back and put them in place. So this is how that entire system works. And yes, at the same time, start reducing the waste, start segregating your waste. Now you might think, what has this got to do with working in your home gardens and working as a landscape architect? But believe me, permaculture is not just a design system. It actually sort of starts becoming your way of life. You start questioning your lifestyle choices, you start questioning your lifestyle patterns. You just simply become aware of the kind of waste that we are generating. So all just starts falling in place. It's never something that is happening in isolation. You start questioning your clothing styles or choices. You start questioning your places where you want to eat, or whether you want to really cook at home, and whether you want to just call people at home and do that. Anything, literally every bit starts falling into place once you start imbibing that design philosophy as part of your life, and not see it as something absolutely different from your existence. And then finally you kind of wake up to stuff like this, like you've put seeds for sprout, you're excited ki are aaj sprout hua hai ki nahi, is it ready to plant or not. You start seeing interactions like this in a pot, where I always say this, like one pot per plant is a myth. You should actually add multiple things in one pot and just see how the plants beautifully start interacting with each other. For example, we had this one pot where we had initially prepared compost, and in that we started layering other things. So we put kadi patta plants, we put multivitamin plants, we started putting some blue pea, we started putting some pongemia, I mean karanj ka jo hota hai, those seeds started sprouting. We started putting some brahmi, and that little pot in itself became like a small universe of one plant supporting the other. Lizards would come by. We named those lizards also. They were staying with us all through the lockdown, and we used to actually interact with them. That used to be our part of our morning conversations. Then you start saving peels and whatnot for your bioenzymes because you want to cut down on your soap requirements. You start saving things like onion peels and pomegranate peels because you found out you can prepare nice colors and you can actually use them for painting and dyeing and whatnot. So all these little things start get active in your daily life. And then these things happens, like birds come to your window, you start talking with them. You have these kind of preparations happening all around. You start preparing your own soap, you start preparing your own washing liquids, you start preparing your cleansing liquids, and it just starts making sense, so that everything about your home garden kind of falls in place because the kind of decisions that you are making about your own life. Of course, while I'm doing all this, it kind of started influencing my art as well. So whatever little paintings or illustrations that I was doing, they also started having this element of nature very strongly coming up. So this was a wall painting that we did at Native Place, where we conduct those workshops every 3 months, permaculture design workshops. So it just kind of starts making sense. Like it kind of influences every aspect of your life, is what I would like to say. And now we'll get started with the main design processes and the landscape design bit. So here I'll be talking about a small landscape project, which is also where permaculture played a big role. It's a 20 guntha land in Karjat, I mean near Karjat actually, quite away in fact. And this is the kind of mosaic of landscapes that you have to cross before you reach that particular space. So there is no direct vehicular connectivity up to that space. But what happens is you have to get down at that last point in the village and then you walk. And then while you're walking, you come across these streams, you come across huge trees, you come across some grassland type areas, you come across some rocky outcrops, you come across little farms, and you see all these little interactions happening. So if you're paying attention, if you're observing these interactions, this is where your design inputs or your design influence or philosophy starts happening, when you're actually working on your piece of land or your this thing. So just giving a quick background, as you can see here, this is that small piece of land that we were working on, and in the practically in the middle of nowhere. I mean, here you have hills happening all around you in the north, and there are rice fields. There is no immediate human habitation anywhere, but it was a lovely space to work, and it had these elevated tops. It had some rocky outcrops, and it also had some space where a lot of water used to get accumulated on the piece of land. So before starting any design interventions, obviously we started working with a little observations of water coming from, how many trees are there, what kind of trees are there, what kinds of animals and birds. The same kind of documentation that you're doing for your campus right now is something similarly we do as part of the process that is happening. Okay, I think my internet, am I audible? My internet connection was just weak.
थोड़ा सा लैगिंग है but yeah it's okay. It's
Okay, I think I'll maybe switch my video off. That might help.
yeah चलेगा.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, so then we started doing this, like analyzing, exactly documenting the biodiversity of that area, documenting the kind of species, the plants, animals that exist over there. And then we also start identifying the challenges of a particular place. Now, everywhere in our state, normally during summers, the problem is that there is not enough water around and landscapes have become very bare and dry. In this site, however, it was exactly the opposite. This is the image in April, and we had water seepage issues over there, and water used to literally become stagnant and accumulate in the piece of land to this extent. Imagine if this is the state in April, what it used to become like a big mucky space during monsoons, and the entire land was absolutely impossible to work with because it was a kind of soil that actually accumulates a lot of water. Clayey soil becomes very sticky, plants cannot grow well, less organic matter in the soil. And at the same time, the other part of the land had this kind of a rocky space, very less soil cover, hardly any soil cover. So we were dealing with two drastically opposite kind of situations in one single site. So while starting, we actually began with certain design objectives that we had to work with the soil first. We had to create maybe a system called a food forest, which is in sync with the forest around. We had to work with water management. We had to work with waste management, and then eventually start working with the space. We start working with soil, water, vegetation, and then eventually come down to systems, and then that little bit of landscape that is there around the house. Next is yeah, so this was like a design proposal that was there for the final landscape that was happening. In short, I'll just explain. So this is the house where we had the rocky outcrop. We decided to place the house in this area, and that little curated landscape around that, along with the grey water treatment from the house. Grey water is the water that enters, goes out of the house from your bathrooms and kitchens and sinks and everything. So that we thought can be utilized to water our garden, and hence we thought that could be part of the house, I mean around the house itself. Then the space in between, which was like a bridge between these two lands, we decided to use it for a vegetable gardening. And finally, a little bit of intervention, and this entire chunk was going to be converted into a food forest. Over here also, we were trying to understand how the water flows existing that are there on site. There was a canal that is there above, like a little bit above, but all the seepage water used to enter through these areas. So we had to determine how to stop the water, or how to take the water to outside a particular site, or how to use that water as part of a landscape. We had to decide in what zones all these design interventions was happening, how the wind direction is, how the heat is. All these factors are taken into consideration, and eventually we started working on that. We also decided to give some thumbnail sketches to the custodians of the land so that they understand what is happening, because you can't just give a plan and say this is what we'll work. So these little sketches help them understand how the spaces are going to look. So like you're looking outside the house and you see some courtyard like this, or that little water tank that was there, we decided to make a small gazebo or a small structure below it. The vegetable trellises would occur something like this while you're going from one part of the land to the other. And that little area where the water used to get accumulated throughout, we decided we'll make a pond out of it. And so that we can put some edible plants at the same time, it became like a recreational space. Sorry. Then this is like a small planting palette. We decided to study all the vegetation in the area around, and then made a good list of wish list of the clients. Then there was a list of plants that are necessary and suitable to that natural ecosystem, and we add them so that it is supporting the flora and fauna from that ecosystem as well. Then at the same time added a lot of fruit trees, some edible, some just flowering trees, and a mix of basically the trees, and that is given as a list over here. What kind of planting happens, where it happens, all these studies were elaborately done for the first monsoon, and then we started working on the landscape. So before we just got directly with the planting, we decided to have a small nursery. This is a very important space. Even if you're doing your little home window garden, or you're doing your little space in the city, or you're doing your space outside the city, doesn't matter. it's good to have and start with a small plant nursery of your own by collecting seeds, collecting cuttings, and start growing those plants, because they get accustomed to your piece of land, accustomed to your climate, accustomed to your microclimate, and then accordingly that helps with the growth of the plants as well. Then next we started doing a little bit of boundary trenches to take the water away instead of letting it seep in the soil. We decided to dig a small well, and we just, whatever earlier intervention had happened, we decided to simply flatten it out and just observe this particular piece of land during monsoons just to see what happens. Then after the first monsoons, like I said, it is a hands-on experience. So all of us started marking the contours on site. We actually made a little YouTube, which is one of the devices that you can use to mark the contours, with the help of our helping team, with the help of the tribals from around. We ourselves were involved in marking of the trenches, making the swales, and all of these things. And then we started planting them one by one. So what happened was, we initially make these water harvesting trenches so as to allow the water to slow down and sink it, so that the water table in general of the area is also high, especially during the monsoons. By water table, I mean water moisture. Sorry, that's a wrong term to say. Moisture in the soil remains even post monsoons for an extensive period of time, so that our dependency on the water systems to irrigate this particular piece of land, that goes down. So you have the trellis area that I earlier mentioned over here. We started growing our vegetables below that. We had this kind of bunds and trenches made, which aid in the water conservation bit, at the same time give us framework to plant different kinds of plants. Then our boundaries, we use bamboos and all these kind of vegetation to have them along the boundary, so that this bigger trench that we had used to divert the water was in a way helping sustain the growth of these. Like, we do not have any drip irrigation or any watering system over here. These are solely working and sustaining all on the basis of the water that gets accumulated in the trench over here. Our next intervention was the grey water system. Like I mentioned, the grey water system is the water that enters or gets out of our house through our bathrooms and kitchens. For the black water, we had a septic tank done, because there was so much water seepage issues. It was best to have an enclosed system for that. But for the grey water, we decided that we'll have a 3 basins kind of a system, where in the first basin, we actually allow the water to come and seep in and allow it to stay stable for a while. Then we direct the water into the next basin, where we are putting plants like cannas and different types of grasses like vetivers and umbrella palms, and different vegetative methods in order to treat this particular grey water. And finally, it goes into the third basin and then out into the garden. So we started with making a little ditch for our grey water, converted it into those number of basins, lined them with stone that was there from the vicinity. Mind you, none of these materials came from like kilometers away. Everything came from just areas around. And then we started planting these particular systems. So grey water system, when we started, looked something like this. After 2 months, it started looking like this, where it was completely in operation. And in 7 months, it had become something like this, where the entire system started taking over. There was no foul smell or anything. We had different species of frogs and toads coming here. We had different birds coming here. And it became such a thicket in itself that even we were not, the birds used to come and make a racket and drive us out of that area, because it became like a small area or small niche of their own. So this became like a nice space, and you would never know that there is actually water recycling happening in this particular space. You had different edibles and drumsticks and bananas and different fruit trees like your auras and whatnot growing over here. So again, this became an entirely self-sustaining system. We never watered the plants. Only the grey water used to get completely absorbed in the areas around, and the plants used to do a beautiful job of filtering the water and utilizing it for their own growth. Again, yes, this is a nice crimson sunbird visiting us on a winter morning on the cannas, and it would really enjoy the nectar of the canna flowers. Yeah. Another interesting thing that we did while working on this project was making of the fire lines. You guys must have heard the problem of Vanwa, or the forest fires that usually happen in areas in the Western Ghats or in the Sahyadris, especially on the onset of summers. So we had to learn how to control this fire. Now, this as a system, I had just learned in theory, but here I actually got to practice it. Our neighboring villagers, they actually came to us and they taught us how to do that, how to make a controlled fire line, and how to not have your landscape affected because of all the fires that were coming on from the surrounding areas. So this was another big learning, something that I had just read about but not participated in. That was again another hands-on experience. Then our next intervention was the gully. In the beginning, I mentioned that we had a lot of seepage issues. And what happened was, because of the seepage issues, there was a small gully or a little erosive feature that was getting created in the land. What we decided to do was watch it for one monsoon and just see what happens. When we decided to watch it for a monsoon, it suddenly, from something like a 2 feet wide gully, became a 6 feet like hole in the middle of the land, and we decided that something had to be done of this. And hence, a design proposal was there such that we make it into a little pond, we line it with stones and add some little water features here and there, and again use plants to help control the erosion. So over here, once again, a YouTube came into play and we started marking the depths of the gully or the feature that we wanted to have. We marked the element around, and then finally, this is where we got started. This was the erosive feature. It was just taking away all the soil and water along with it. And it was just getting out. I mean, nothing was really happening. When we started off, it was this wide, and after one monsoon it actually became like a big hole in the land. So we decided to finally line it up with stones, give it a little structure, give it a little design element, make it a little aesthetically appealing, and at the same time use plants. So this is how the gully looks today. So you wouldn't believe that something like this was actually taking our soil out, and today this is what has happened. Again, there are different fish thriving here all by themselves, there are different frogs coming here. This has become a small pond habitat in itself today. Our next design intervention was a food forest. This is where your entire, this is where something that the principles of a food forest is something that you can also apply at the home level thing also. Remember, I spoke about that little pot initially where we were going kadipattas and brahmi and some flowering plants and everything together. So the same concept is over here basically, but on a much bigger scale. So what is a food forest? You must have known what happens in a forest, right? You have bigger trees, smaller trees, climbers, shrubs, and everything together. But in a natural forest, in a natural ecosystem, not everything is edible for the humans. Of course, we have little part over there also, but mainly it's a self-sustaining system in itself. So we borrow the same concept and thought instead of having plain fields and and just growing one type of monocultural crops, why not incorporate the same system in an edible landscape, in a productive landscape, and have the same thing happening? So then in a food forest, what you have is basically a closed canopy of trees. These may be a mix of edible ones, or they may be just native plants supporting the natural ecosystem, and it can be a combination of both. And you have certain climbers that are perennials that can go along the trees. These can be edible also. They can, depending on the kind of sun exposure that they get. There are different shrubs that are there on one tops. They are there interspersed with some pollinator attracting plants. There are different flowering shrubs. There are some herbs that you can use in your kitchens. There are buns and swales that are actually doing their job of soil conservation and water conservation simultaneously. There are grasses, creepers, and herbs on one sides. Sometimes these just volunteer and come on your own. You don't even have to do anything. It's like you're just putting up a framework in place, putting some plants, and then simply nature takes over, and it just becomes a beautiful forest like system in order to have. So this is where we started in the first image initially. This was the first monsoon where all we did was planted some vetiver grass, which is your khaswara that we use during summers. to cool the water, the roots of which are used to cool the water, or the curtains of which are used in the dry landscape areas. We put some plants in place, and then after our interventions of having the swales and the trenches and some bunds, this is how the system began. And the spaces in between, we started having small crops like groundnuts or certain green manure crops. The vetiver grass became like this. We started growing pineapples on the mulched beds. We started having haldi and ginger and banana clusters coming in. So this landscape within 2 years became something like this. Then, like I mentioned, the spaces where there was a lot of water still coming in, we decided to have a little bit of rice farming. We would actually call up friends and family from, and they would happily jump in, and we would grow our own little bit of rice, how much ever it is. Then there would be haldi and ginger along the punts, and this is how we just start activating. So, in a way, you are not just doing something soil and water, you're also getting some produce out of it. So there is that little bit of satisfaction that you're getting something out of the landscape. You don't have to wait for years and years before some yield starts coming out of your land. So this is what we were doing at the beginning when we had just finished our first line of swales and mulching them together, and this is what the landscape looks like today. So this is not like your typical landscape design where you have things like just typically looking nice and everything is green and everything. The landscape becomes dry, plants become, it follows the cycle of seasons basically. All the characters of the season start coming in. At the same time, you have different edibles at very different layers that are there. So you can see this is the same hill. So today, this is what it looks like. And a typical edible landscape will look something like this. So you have bananas, we have garangal, or what we call the Thai ginger, a very essential ingredient on all the Thai food. We have sweet potatoes as a ground cover. We have something like tag, which is a nitrogen fixing element. We have many different native trees that we've put, mulberries and guavas and whatnot. So everything that you end up buying at your fruit market, at your vegetable market, is basically coming from this little piece of land that is over here. And there is this big rewarding experience of being involved in this kind of a landscape. You're always getting some produce or the other. Whenever I visit my landscape sites, I'm actually getting something from there. Sometimes there are huge pumpkins, and sometimes there are radishes and tonleaves and some amaranth, palak, methi, whatnot. Plus you get to see and understand all these interactions. You get to see different kinds of birds. You get to just enjoy these small moments of completing a day's work, and everyone's just sitting back together and enjoying their cup of tea, at the same time appreciate the landscape. So all these little things happen, and it's not a sterile landscape. It's a very dynamic thing. Continuously something or the other is always happening in a landscape of this kind. So that is how, yeah, so that was the one project. And now we'll just talk about some elements in landscape design, something that you can just pick up and do on their, maybe multiply it or work on it on your own. So this was another site of mine. This was in Igatpuri, where the site came to us in literally this fashion. So there was a road that was made, and there was literally very less or next to nothing of a soil cover, because repeatedly the grasses were burned. Every nutrition of the soil was kind of absorbed, and nothing really remained around. So this was how the thing looked. And this was the master plan that was actually designed for this particular site. It was a resort. It is for a resort. The work is still happening. And you have these little villas with their own front gardens, a little common landscape around where you have some play areas, some areas for some celebrations and some outdoor activities. And at the same time, there are these little elements of inserts in the landscape. So we introduce something like a mandala garden, the photo of which you will see later. And we had some existing restaurant block over here, so we decided to prepare a little bit of edible gardens where we started growing our coriander and herbs and pudina and jo kuch chota chota hota hai, basically to support that little restaurant. Then we started having a little bit of a percolation pond over here, vegetation thickets, where we allowed the natural vegetation to flourish, because not everywhere interventions are required. Sometimes you just have to plant certain bit of trees and then just let the natural landscape take over. and whatever it is, it will start thriving. All you have to do is just protect it from external elements, and the landscape just starts beautifully behaving on its own. So you have these little bit of edible gardens and ornamentals coming in front of the villa. So it was a balanced kind of a thing. It was not entirely a landscape where, it's just everything is cut and trimmed. At the same time, small interactions are happening at various levels, even in the landscape. So over here, I'll just quickly talk about the mandala garden, where you have this kind of a thing. You have herbs growing in the inner layers. You have smaller shrubs. Some of them are flowering. Some of them are edible. Some of them are climbers that we put on supports, and some of them are fruit trees around. So all these little elements we started playing with in the landscape. So this is how the initially the mandala garden looked like when we started off. So you have these little 5 circles with Ghendu and different types of basils, different types of tulsi, lemongrass, and all your basic kitchen requirements taken care of. Today, I can't even stand in between the garden and take a photo because everything has kind of closed in. Trees have become big, and climbers and all supports have come together. So this photograph was actually possible when there was nothing around. Today, you actually have to just go and stand in the middle of the space and experience it, because everything is grown. So now photo lena bhi possible nahi hota hai for you to gauge what is exactly happening. Then we introduced some farming activities with the visitors of the resort. So we used to make the kids plant our seasonal vegetables. We used to grow saplings in our nursery, and then they would actually have a field day planting tomatoes and planting different types of seeds coming into play. Then there was also something like, we had green vegetables, leafy vegetables coming in. This was that little space for the edible garden. This was a space in transition. So we thought of doing mixed beds over here. So we had oa, grasses, pudina, and mirchi plants, and all radishes and everything, pumpkins growing together in this particular set of space. And very basic minimal materials used. So this kind of a mixed bed is what I was talking about. So the concept of a food forest, if you scale it down to literally one small bed, if you have a balcony where you can actually prepare this kind of a situation, you can have so many things growing in this particular area. So we used to get, then everyone used to get inside excited. Like you get some mirchis, it used to come on the groups, everybody is excited. You get some fruits like chikkus, again, excitement. First chikku came, everywhere, everyone would be happy. First muli came, everyone would be happy. So that is the level of interaction and they get involved with. But at the same time, since it was a space that was a resort, we also needed open areas. So we decided to have some spaces dedicated to lawns. But this lawn also had another interesting area. This was the same space that literally had no soil cover. So instead of bringing in soil from outside, we decided to layer it with a lot of organic matter by grasses and leaves and everything around, and barely use like 2 inches of soil on top. So below this lawn, you have these big, fat, beautiful earthworms that are actually thriving in this area. And like, so lawn doesn't typically behave like a lawn. There are actually many things happening outside these tents. We planted many butterfly attracting plants. So early morning when the guests are sitting in the porches, they are going to see small sunbirds. They are going to see many different types of butterflies. So instead of being like a foot away from there, you're actually kind of in the middle of the whole action when you're sitting on the steps and you have butterflies flitting all around you. And they are not even scared of you. Somehow they are not even bothered about your presence. They'll just come and sit on your forehead, on your cheeks, on your hands. And it's a very beautiful moment to experience when that happens. And today, this is how again the space looks like. The plants have started growing well. The trees have finally started coming up. Canopy is showing up. We have a lot of mix of natives that are there. And the entire space that initially looked like, oh my God, such a big chunk of lawn is actually now reduced to a small, neat space, and it is surrounded by trees all over. This was another play area that was there. Again, a little bit of turf is okay because that is how we want spaces for people to play. But at the same time, we have provided like a lot of green vegetation around, and we have allowed it to go wild. Ki badhne do, jaise bad raha hai, badhne do. That is the main thing. And today you have again a mix of certain areas that you want to play with. At the same time, you have a big chunk of wild patch happening just in the vicinity. You have some swales and other fruit trees coming up over here, and the play area is kind of engulfed in between these spaces. Then another thing that we did was when it comes to draining, we did not use our concrete drain channels that normally you find in the cities. We decided instead of having that, let us just make swales, line them up with stones, no cement or anything, and let us just plant things over there. So what we started off with, this little base of a swale and some cannas and some ground covers around. Today you have a good mix of Brahmi. So whenever the restaurant people have to prepare some salads or some chutneys, they literally come on the road, harvest that Brahmi from the road itself and go back. You have a lot of lemongrass around, you have fruit trees and fungus and this kind of plants around. So it doesn't feel like, a stormwater drain is some actual topic that needs to be taken into consideration. It's some element that simply blends with the landscape around, not really picking and choosing and doing too many design calculations to achieve it. All you have to do is study your plants, understand their characteristics, understand how long they can sustain on the moisture that is provided by the soils, and automatically things fall in place. Then we also incorporated things like, whenever initially we used to have water problems, we decided to have pitcher irrigation systems. So we planted trees. We just put one matka around each of the trees. We would fill the matka with water, mulch the plants around, and let the trees thrive. So this is the same area that looks like this today. Even during summers, when everywhere around we kind of have the dried grasses coming into place, somehow our ground covers remain moist and green for a substantially longer period of time, because we've just allowed it to grow. All we did over there was plant these trees initially and then let the space be. Nature is very intelligent, it knows how to take care of itself. We really don't need to do much. Then some little nice surprises start happening. This one plant belongs to the genus of the rattlepod trees, and we had blue tigers in huge numbers. This was the first time something like this happened. We never planted this tree, it just came on its own. So when you do just that supporting framework and you allow the landscape to develop on its own, something like this happens. And nobody noticed this till the time I just went and I was like, okay, my God, there are some 50, 100 butterflies on this one plant. What are they doing? And they were so oblivious to your presence. You went as near them as possible, but it just didn't matter to them. So these little things start happening and they are really exciting. Then even for things like small pavilions, we decided to rely on the vegetative systems. So we planted some plants, mulched the beds very well, and allowed them to grow. Again, today it is this kind of a jungle. And in that entire area, before all other structures came up, this little pavilion used to be the only place where it would get really dark and shady. And I mean, shade would be appropriate. We also had other pavilions coming into the play where uh, yeah, so we decided, so this was like a circular herb work where you have different kinds of edible plants coming. So in the center you have different herbs, different ground covers and different creepers coming together. On the top we have things like passion fruits, you have more edible trees all around, and people just take a walk. They get educated about the kind of plants that you can grow inside your house or in your little gardens. At the same time, the space is providing you with some information about those plants. And again, this is how the space looks like. So you are walking around this, you have some small seats and benches. You can just sit down, appreciate that little mint that is there in the central planter, appreciate those garlic chives, pluck a leaf, probably smell it, eat it. How many times you can actually go to your gardens in your cities and actually sit on a bench and start eating those things? Okay, so this is another important element. Like, why can't we imagine our landscapes in and around in common areas where people are allowed to, enjoy that little interactive measure that they. So this is what. So we have mints. We have different types of mints. We have peppermint and spearmint and pudina, sadha apla mint. Then there are garlic. There are flowers like your desi gulabs, which you can eat the petals all by themselves. There is shankha pushpi growing. There are different types. There are pomegranates, chikkus. Everything is growing in that small diameter, and the plants are doing very well. You have a nice drumstick over here. You have a hadga plant whose flowers are edible. So you don't really basically need extensive spaces. Even in small intensive space, with a little bit of thinking and understanding your plants, many things can come together and become an interesting thing. Now, this is a hyacinth, but we have contained it in a small pond, a small matka. But so just because the flowers are very pretty, and sometimes it's nice to look at pretty flowers as well. So then this is how it becomes. You have to interact with your landscapes. Your butterflies simply start liking you when you know ki you are, when they know ki you are taking care of them as well in your landscapes. There are different types of caterpillars, different frogs coming. You start documenting them. And the funny thing is not just you, even your clients start enjoying those. Every time anybody from the site team goes there and they see something different, they'll click a photo and send to you, Madam, ye kya grow ho raha hai? Madam, ye kuch naya aa gaya. So it's an opportunity for them to understand that something nice is happening. It is an opportunity for you to understand. If a new small insect comes in about whom you've not known earlier, you'll Google it, inquire with your friends, ask them what is. It's an addition to your knowledge as well. So this is how these landscapes are continuously evolving. And then in different projects, for example, little bit of water management, you have lawn areas, but at the same time you cannot do your extensive swales and bunds, so you modify the trenches, you add a little bit of say brown matter in the trench, you cover it with a little bit of grit on top, and that is how it starts acting like a silt trap. So whenever there is water flowing across, initially during the summers when the grass has completely dried and the soil gets washed off during the first monsoon, these little traps start acting like your soil traps. So the nutrients are not getting washed away. And the turf comes up. Eventually, once the grasses come, there is not going to be much loss of soil cover. But it helps, and it is possible even in these turf-like areas. These little measures definitely help. Then you can do something like this in a farmhouse as well. If you have a bigger piece of land, that you can have a certain area that is given to some conventional plantation and everything, but then you have small food forests coming into play. You have little herb gardens and butterfly gardens and all these little things. So when we started off, our food forest with the swales looked something as drab as this, and then within few months it starts looking like this, and then within few months you stay back, you put your hands up, and the entire vegetation simply starts taking over. So over here, what you see here is a type of a sweet potato. This is lemongrass. Then there is something called as a different species of citronella grasses. This is the hadga plant. The behind there are some fruit plants. There is papaya, there is banana, there is hibiscus, the leaves and the flowers of which are very good for making tea, for adding things to your hair oil. So different things start coming into play basically. And you can sometimes make community activities out of it as well. Call people, call friends. Everyone is very excited to come and plant. And whenever they plant some things with their own hands, you are obviously more attached to that plant. So next time when you're going back to the farm or going back to the space, you're going to run to the first plant that you ever planted, going to make sure that it's sustaining well, it's doing well, add things to it. So all things like these happen. Then also you can get into understand more local cultures. There are systems that you have been using. For example, for a gazebo over here, instead of having a conventional roofing system, we decided why not use the carvi that has been growing in the areas around on the slopes, and we decided to make the mats and use that as a roofing material. So that is another addition to your own skill, another addition to your own understanding, and this is how the landscape keeps evolving, and you're always interacting with things in and around. So in a nutshell, basically, what is permaculture design, or what is this thing about an interactive landscape? This is what. So there are all these little elements in the entire landscape, okay? And you are somewhere here, okay? But at the same time, plants are interacting with each other. There are guilds happening. Birds are acting as messengers. Plants are talking to each other. Plants are talking to the insects and flies and grasshoppers. You are interacting with all these elements. Roots are interacting. So there are so many things happening. It's just up to us to understand that and respect these systems. Once we do a little bit, the systems simply take over, and they can be so productive and so efficient that there comes a time probably that our involvement in this entire system starts reducing. Obviously, when you want to grow food, it is a continuous interaction, it's a continuous effort, and you have to have. but it makes you aware of these systems that exist in nature, and then you start thereby not superimposing your will on the system, but you in fact become a indispensable part of this little system. So that is where I think I'm going to end, and I hope I have not offshot the time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anushri. Thank you very much. Actually, just today only I was in the field with around 25 students, and we were talking about the same thing, how trees and the leaves and roots they talk with each other. And the student who was with me, she said, "Really? They talk with each other?" I said, "Yes, they talk with each other." So yeah, this was a fantastic session, and students, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask Anushri. Unmute yourself and you can ask directly.
Hi, ma'am. I have a question.
Yes.
So, living in this lifestyle and, completely immersing yourself with nature, what are some takeaways, some really small changes that people can,
Hmm.
just effective immediately start implementing? If someone doesn't have like the resources or like a space to build a garden, what would you suggest for them to do?
See, like I mentioned initially, there are little changes that you start need to making in your own life to begin with. Okay. Firstly, go and interact more with the plants around you, because even before you start doing something in your house or doing something at an individual level, it is important to get connected with your surroundings. It is important to get connected. And then there is a lot that you can do. Like you saw in the beginning, for me the playfield was my window. Everything started, for every ounce of learning actually started when I start put my first seed in the soil. The first thing that I ever put was, घर के kitchen में जाओ, you have their mustard seeds available from the tadka wala dabba, take them, put them in the soil, and just see what happens. Okay, that little starter is good enough for you to understand ki, okay, this is how I can get started. And then you realize, okay, there are so many seeds right inside the house, and I don't even want to go to the market. Methi seeds are there inside the house. Put the methi, it will come. There are different pulses inside the house. Put them in, they will, something will grow. So this is how your interactions start with. And once start getting connected with your soil, and like Shilpa ma'am said, talking, please talk to each other. You should also talk to your plants. Okay, plants understand you, believe me, like just the way your pets do, plants definitely understand you, they understand your energies. Talk to them. And this is where this little interactions are. Then you go on to your next step, where you're starting to manage your waste. You're talking about your wet waste, you're talking about composting systems, you're talking about how much you want, how your needs are. You're starting to reevaluate your own lifestyles over there. Maybe less screen time, maybe less watching videos, maybe less Instagram, probably more time with your plants. Somewhere these things, 5 minutes a day, come Instagram scrolling kar liya, let's go back and spend some time at the window or the balcony or the terrace or your park in the society, wherever you are. Okay, Pune people are blessed with takeries. Little less time on the phone taking photos, more time actually being mindful of your surroundings. This is how you get started. And eventually there is a lot of help available online. There are a lot of forums discussing these things, doing these things. Your own campus is involved in a lot of things. So help is always there around, but initially the first step would be to establish that little connect with nature and understand. Grow one little plant and you'll understand how much difference it makes to your own life, just because of that presence of one plant is what I would.
Um,
So, and Anushri, it's not every time everyone has that much place to get
Correct.
healed also. So I
Right.
guess, as you said, ki put some coriander seeds, or so even that kind of mix forest in your pot will invite other insects and birds. And yes, I also have two, three geckos around my mulching pot and my waste pot. So yes, that's the fun part actually.
Exactly. And I mean, obviously, I understand that there are times when, enough sunlight is not available. Some places are very shaded all the time. But there are also plants that can adjust to those kind of situations. Okay. जैसे आप फॉरेस्ट में ही देख लो, not all areas are going to have uniform sunlight. There are always some shaded areas, and there are plants thriving below that despite that lack of sunlight. So nature basically has a solution for everything. You have to be prepared to study and experiment a bit, and things start falling in place. So yes.
Yeah, great. So those who are here, can you please open your videos? We'll take one group photo. Yes, Asmita, you can go ahead. Can you please open your videos also? We are a small group here. Those who can, please open. Yes, Asmita, you can go ahead.
Hello, ma'am. I really like the session. I would just like to ask you something that over this quarantine period, I have sort of started to grow a lot of plants. I started with a succulent, I started with a snake plant, and that's somehow in the way turned out to be 50, 60 plants. It took over my whole house over the quarantine period. So
Nice.
I've been a plant mother for a year, I think, and it feels great when I totally understand when you say that the plants interact with each other and they sort of, pull through the weak ones to grow and be happy. I get that. What I would like to ask you is that how do I shape this passion of mine? It makes me very happy. How do I shape this into a career?
Okay. So, Asmita, okay, so see, the thing is, it's nice that you finally have your own green space and you're growing so many plants and you're actually having those. So there are many courses available, okay, where people are doing permaculture design workshops, and the extensive course is a 13-day course with a full PDC. And there are some introduction in courses also happening within the city, around the city, so you can enroll for one of these. In fact, I, along with some colleagues of mine, conduct these workshops at this place called Native Place near Kamshet every 3 months. It's a 2-day workshop. But there you can start attending these courses in order to enhance your knowledge in these areas. At the same time, there are many community farms around. So about Pune, maybe I'll have to find out, but Bombay and all areas I know, where you can go and actually volunteer them. So it's one thing when you're doing it at a house scale, but when the scale kind of increases and when there are different sets of plants coming into play, then what all different problems do we encounter with, or how to have a sustaining system when you are supposed to cater to a specific requirement. So when these additional layers of information starts coming into play, these kind of volunteering opportunities help. In fact, there are many farms all over India, in and around Pune as well, in fact, where you can get in touch with them and check if they have any volunteering opportunities. So that is where your learning starts. And eventually, the more you work on land with your own hands and with your own observations, the more you are going to get confident about, taking up small projects. And people always need help around. अगर आप आपके friend circle में पूछ लो, once they see you doing this kind of stuff, slowly those little inquiries come. Ki, will you come and do it for us, or will you help us out with it? So maybe you can start applying that knowledge to start off with their own family and friends, and then once you get confident, just start taking up one project on your own. So there is no educational qualification, I would say. There are many courses that you can take up, volunteer at different places, and start small. Eventually, yes, it will become a very nice thing to get into. Sure.
So I
Thank you,
guess
ma'am.
they can stay connected with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Surely I would like to get in touch with you and probably get more information from you and your colleagues to further go into this.
Absolutely, no problem. Sure.
So there is one question in the chat box.
Yeah, sensory garden. Okay. So, what happens when you go in a garden typically? Okay, your public gardens, for example, you will go there and there are some play equipments for kids, probably some pathways to walk on, some benches to sit. There are some trees. Not necessarily all plants and flowers are something that you are allowed to pluck or something like. What happens in sensory garden is we design certain spaces keeping your five senses into play. Say, for example, we have certain plants which have flowers, which have very interesting fragrances. Okay, so your sense of smell is triggered by that. You place them in a certain direction where it is it's conjoined with the wind direction, so that when there is a slight breeze coming in, you can actually smell those plants in the garden. Or you're sitting in on some benches and there are some plants around, the leaves of which, if you touch them and then if you try to smell your fingers, they'll have some scent of their own. Okay, or else these are the gardens where you can actually pluck certain things, you can harvest a little bit of produce, or you can walk on different textures in the pathways or on the turf, and then you also have a different sense of feeling. I mean, you're feeling different textures on your feet, so what you call acupressure or acu something, yeah, wo sab jo hota hai, that is naturally happening when you're walking barefoot in a garden like this. You can see different textures. Green is not just one green. If you go in nature, there are various shades of green happening around. Okay, there are different shades even during different seasons. There are certain flowers, or I mean, there are certain trees that dry up completely and you just see flowers of different colors, like your bahava or your katesavar. I mean, these are bombax plants that you will see in the city. So these are the plants that completely shed their leaves, and all you see is splashes of yellow, splashes of red. So a sensory garden is something that is basically catering to all of these senses in a active point of view. Like, you have given it a thorough consideration. In this season, you are expecting something like this. When you're sitting here, you're expecting something like this. And you plan your spaces around it. So that is what it is, to basically cater and stimulate your senses. That would be a better way of putting it up. Basically, all gardens do that, but this is just like a nudge. Ki dekho, look at the plants around me. That's what.
Okay, great. So with this, I guess we have come to the end of the session. If anyone has any question, they can go ahead. Otherwise, we can end it here.
I had one question. So, hi, ma'am. Hope you're having a nice day. And you have definitely picked up my day with the session. So, I have been thinking about my school. So, I just graduated, and uh, the kids, they've been at home for 1.5 years now. So, I wanted to start a community garden in my school for the lower grades. And I was wondering which plants are, I mean, what could you suggest that would be easy for them to understand and interact with?
Okay, so this is a big topic in itself, but I'll just quickly tell you something. See, for kids now, basically, anything that you touch, smell, something at their level that is interesting, that is where the play starts. So colors play an important role. Okay, maybe introduce some things like your ajwain plants or your pudina plants. जिसका leaves को आप हाथ लगाते हो तो immediately there is some connect with them. Some really nice sweet smelling flowers you can introduce. Okay, then chota seeds where tell the kids to actually put them and sow them and just randomly broadcast them. So these little activities, you don't make them do all the things. There is obviously the elders who will be involved and more in the upkeep and doing that, but these small spaces, then you can probably make them work with little bird baths. Put water in some spaces in the garden where the birds come during the hot days and you can see the birds. You can there are some things like those mushroom farms, or what they call. Basically, you're putting some pile of wood together in one place so that there are some different insects and lizards and all that crawling in and out of those spaces. So there are these different small ideas that can make in that particular space so that kids find it enjoyable. Because unlike adults now, kids are not scared of insects. They actually find them very enjoyable. So then you enhance their learning by creating these small niches, and that is good going. And then automatically you can just maybe Google. There are plenty of people doing some interest gardens for kids as well. So you can just look it up online, check. But this is a good way to get started. So
Great. I will share that with them then.
Okay. That was a wonderful question, Muskan. So, okay, Anushree, uh, Thank you very much. So Samriddhi, you can go ahead with the vote of thanks, I guess.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this beautiful and informative session. It was really meaningful and necessary to actually know how we can design those landscape with the pace of nature itself, and how we can actually, balance human and nature interaction as it was supposed to be, by not just destroying the environment through permaculture designs, or how we can make our own compost, and how especially those mini pots that you told us about, creating a whole ecosystem. It was really mesmerizing. We love to learn about the design objective for the landscape project, and the way you explained it all, which made us actually a clear idea of how we can make those barren lands into beautiful landscape, about the food forests and the fire lines. Thank you, but most importantly, we would like to thank you for being an example of that. The change we are thinking about in the world is us ourselves. So thank you so much for this wonderful session. I would also like to thank all the participants for making this session so successful and interactive. But there's also a request to all the participants to please fill in the feedback form, as your suggestion plays an important role for us to motivate us. So thank you to all and have a great evening ahead.